What's up everyone? Holly here once again with another video for our top 5 cancelled game series. After covering Zelda, Mario, and other Nintendo franchises, many of you have been asking for games outside of the Nintendo series. So before getting to Pokemon and Sonic, which are two of the most popular requests, we decided to cover cancelled games in the world of PlayStation. You can also expect a video on Xbox coming up in the near future as well. Remember to leave what games you would like us to cover in the comments below, and be sure to give us a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. With all that out of the way, let's begin. Beginning our list is Jak 4. Pre-production of the game began as early as 2006 and possibly even before. After the release of Jak 3 in 2004 and Jak X Combat Racing in 2005, Sony began sharing details on the upcoming next-gen console, the PlayStation 3. The transitioning period of moving from the PS2 to the PS3 was difficult for the company, and Naughty Dog even refers to the years as Naughty Dog's darkest days. A full quote says the following: "Imagine the two co-founders of Naughty Dog passing the torch to new management. We were switching to brand new rendering technology with the extraordinarily complicated hardware architecture of the PS3, and literally building our entire code base up from scratch. Dozens of new proposals thrown out, months and months of tool work completely scrapped, and for 3 or 4 months straight, no fewer than one employee quitting every week as they lost hope we'd pulled out of our slump."
As production moved forward with Jak 4, Naughty Dog started focusing more and more on the game's linear storytelling approach, and decided to transition Jak 4 into an entirely new IP. The Uncharted series would then be born. In 2008, during development of Uncharted 2, Naughty Dog felt as if they wouldn't be able to focus on 2 separate games. Uncharted 2 took priority, and the smaller PSP title, Jak Daxter: The Lost Frontier, was given to developer High Impact Games to work on. Naughty Dog and Sony producer Sam Thompson ended up acknowledging this mistake and his regret of Naughty Dog not finishing the title. He is quoted as saying, "At the time, it looked like High Impact Games was going to be able to do a pretty good job with it. I don't want to say anything disparaging of them. I like the guys at High Impact, but if we had to do it all over again, we would have done some things differently. In the execution of The Last Frontier, I'm not happy with that being Jak's swan song. I think we could have done a lot better." In 2010, Naughty Dog began working on a project called A Treat to Come Back To. This time, attempting an even more realistic approach than their previous concept of Jak 4, which evolved into the Uncharted series. During pre-production, the team realized that, in their words, there were already so many firmly established relationships, character personalities, and character motivations, and it became tougher to feel engaged by the prospect of making a new Jak Daxter game, due to a dilemma that, if we stuck to the constraints of the already established world, would we be happy with the type of game we're about to make? If we diverged too greatly from those constraints to tell the type of story we wanted to tell, were we actually making Jak Daxter anymore? They ultimately decided what Jak 4 was becoming would be more of a reinvention of the series instead of a continuation, and that longtime fans of the series may end up hating the final product. So once again, they evolved their concept of Jak 4 into another new original IP that they codenamed Thing. Thing would later be released as The Last of Us. So does this mean Jak 4 at one point was a post-apocalyptic story that revolved around zombies, or what they call clickers? Although the Uncharted series and The Last of Us have both gone on to be 2 of PlayStation's most popular franchises, fans are still waiting for the announcement of Jak 4. With pre-production of the first attempt beginning as early as 2005 or 2006, and the second attempt in 2010, perhaps the third time's the charm. However, with Naughty Dog announcing that Uncharted 4 would for now be the last of Nathan Drake, and production of The Last of Us 2 beginning, it may be a few years before Naughty Dog's team is able to work on a game after The Last of Us 2. But it is possible that they could have a small team, or even another third party, working on an unannounced and highly anticipated return of Jak Daxter. In a world where the platformer Knack gets a sequel, which is infamous for being one of the worst PlayStation 4 launch games, I have hope that a more deserving game, which is actually a great platformer, like Jak Daxter, gets its own PlayStation 4 or even PlayStation 5 release, especially with the new Ratchet & Clank on PlayStation 4 being such a great game. Next on our list is possibly one of the most mysterious games on here, as we don't even have a name for the cancelled game. However, we do have a lot of info that can be gathered from leaked artwork, and if we take a look at the developer's track record, this could have easily been a great game if you're into open world futuristic sci-fi games with what looks like different types of giant demon monsters and even larger underworld creatures. Since no actual footage of this game exists, as we discuss all of the details about this cancelled game, we will be showing off leaked images of the mystery game and gameplay of the studio's newest game, which at the time of writing this is God of War for the PlayStation 4, which is believed to have began production around the time of this game's cancellation. This untitled game actually went through at least 4 years of development under Sony Santa Monica Studio, who are probably best known for their work on the God of War franchise. And here's everything we know about this title and its cancellation. In early 2014, Sony announced through IGN that a number of large employees were laid off in what they called a reduction in workforce. This layoff is likely due to the project being cancelled. Sony's official statement on the matter is as follows: SCEA can confirm that we have completed a reduction in workforce at Santa Monica Studio. This is a result of a cycle of resource realignment against priority growth areas within SCE Worldwide Studios. We do not take these decisions lightly. However, sometimes it is necessary to make changes to better serve the future projects of the studio. We have offered outplacement services and severance packages to ease transition of those impacted. At a later date, more information was revealed about the mystery title, thanks to lead level designer on the project, Jonathan Hawkins' LinkedIn profile. In it, he puts the following as his duty and responsibilities on the game. Position, lead level designer, unannounced IP, 2010 through 2014. One of 4 handpicked seasoned developers to lead a new IP from conception. High level design documentation, prototyped and developed gameplay systems. Created greenlit presentations, 2 playable demos with a small team and limited resources. Managed 15 plus designers with daily reviews, feedback, problem solving, and strategic planning. Developed best practices for modular world building, tool creation, and code requests. Open world, scripted linear content, and system design. Conducted analytical playtests for all gameplay sections. Narrative mission design, tools, dialogue, and script feedback. Schedule creation and management with production. Mentored, trained junior designers and new team members. Recruited, reviewed resumes, design test, and conducted interviews. The exact reason behind the project's cancellation is not known, but at a later date and after many questions from fans on the project, Hawkins would finally confirm the production of the game on his Twitter account after being asked by fans. When asked specifically about the layoffs, he responded saying, "We were surprised too," and stated the new game was going to be, quote, badass. He then asked about Stig, another well-known worker on the God of War series' involvement with the mystery game, and what the new game actually was. Hawkins responded with no comment about Stig's involvement and said he couldn't comment on what the IP was because, quote, "it's not my IP." He was then asked if someone from Sony might give more information and he replied, "Probably not, and I'm not going to air out the dirty laundry. It is what it is, sad face emoji." After the unintentional Q&A was finished, he wrote a short message for everyone saying, "Yesterday I was laid off. It was a good 10-year run and I got to make 3 90+ games. I lived the dream and got to accomplish all of my goals, except one, making something out of nothing and creating a new AAA IP. The saddest part of waking up today is I no longer get to work with my family. Secondly, the pain that I feel for my friends who have lost their jobs. The saddest and most important part is the game I was creating for the player that will never be played. I'm sorry that I failed you. I've been awoken from my dream, but soon I will fall into a gentle slumber. My Vishnu skills will become better from this, and I'll dream again." Finally, on a later date, NerdLeaks came across a former Santa Monica employee's portfolio, which contained work he did on past games, one of which just happened to be the unannounced PlayStation 4 title. The artwork and images seen during this video are from the employee's photos. However, the images were quickly removed from NerdLeaks' website. And, to my knowledge, as of right now, no other information has come to light. After cancellation of this new IP, Santa Monica has thought to have began work on the God of War 3 remaster and pre-production of the new God of War, both games releasing for the PlayStation 4. Hopefully, with this new God of War game being a reboot of sorts, perhaps we will see some mechanics and designs from the original IP make its way in. After all, it would be such a waste to see at least 4 years of work just thrown away. Third on our list is the cancelled sequel to Legend of Dragoon on the PlayStation 1. Developed by Sony's Japan studio and produced by Shuhei Yoshida, who is now president of Sony's worldwide studios. While the original RPG didn't sell amazingly well and generally received a mix of average and positive review scores, it has become a cult classic among many RPG and PlayStation fans. Many publications have even said that failing to turn the classic into a full AAA franchise alongside PlayStation's other popular series has been a huge mistake on Sony's end. This was later proven to be even more obvious when Sony decided to release the game on the PlayStation Network as a PS1 classic, where it remained the #1 best-selling classic game for 3 months and remained in the top 5 for 2 more. During the release of Legend of Dragoon on the PlayStation Network, Shuhei Yoshida revealed that a sequel was actually in development. He is quoted as saying, "I still occasionally hear from fans of The Legend of Dragoon, and many want to know if there is a sequel. Legend of Dragoon 2 was put in pre-production after I left the Japan studio, but was eventually cancelled for some unknown reason, and the team members moved on to different projects." Shuhei was promoted to vice president in the year 2000. The original Legend of Dragoon was released in 1999 in Japan and 2000 in North America. This means pre-production of the sequel likely began production as soon as the first was completed. However, due to lower than expected sales and the original producer on the game moving on, PlayStation likely decided to scrap the sequel and have the team work on a completely new game. Sadly, because the game was cancelled so early in development, hardly any information outside of Shuhei Yoshida's statement exists. In fact, his interview may be one of the only official times PlayStation has publicly discussed a sequel. Because of this, no real information actually exists, other than at one point it was in pre-production. Sadly, PlayStation is now busy with newer franchises like the new God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, The Last of Us, and others. So, with so much time passing since the height of Dragoon's popularity, it may take some real convincing for Sony to go back to the series. But with the recent return to Crash Bandicoot, maybe PlayStation is showing that they are open to the idea of bringing classic fan favorites to the modern era. Legend of Dragoon 2 and even a remake are both still in very high demand by fans. So let me know in the comments below if you think a remake or a sequel is realistically possible. At number 4 on our list, we decided to give you a bit of a bonus, since both of these games were revealed at the same time and neither has much information. It seemed best to include them together. Spyro and Crash Bandicoot, while neither of these are first-party Sony games, they are mostly looked at and remembered as PlayStation exclusives. When they first began on the PlayStation 1, development of these two games is said to have first started in 2012 and was cancelled in 2013, which would mean they would have likely released on the PlayStation 4. To begin, I want to say that like many cancelled and unreleased games, these two have yet to be officially confirmed. I came across this information from the website Junkie Monkeys, and just like the cancelled Sony Santa Monica Studios game, which went unconfirmed until the lead level designer revealed that the game was in fact cancelled. As no footage exists, and just like Sony Santa Monica's game, we only have artwork. The only thing leaked to the public is concept art that we will be showing from these projects, and gameplay from past Spyro and Crash games. The following information comes from a professional digital artist named Ryan Harrison. He claims to have worked on both games and doesn't give too much information. He says it was in production in April of 2012 and got cancelled in May of 2013. When asked about the titles of the Crash and Spyro games, Ryan responded with the following statement. I actually cannot disclose that information because I'm still under a non-disclosure act for both titles, and they do not want the titles released for some reason. Maybe they are going to reinstate it, even though they were both cancelled. However, I was allowed to post my work for them on my accord. When asked about the cancellation, Ryan responded with the following statement. Honestly, they wouldn't share us the detailed reason as to why. Our projects were fairly young when they were pitched. The Spyro project was much older than the Crash Bandicoot one. The only purpose of posting these were to display my work that I have done and provide interesting ideas that fans might like to see. So any questions outside of artistic inspirations are irrelevant and cannot be answered by myself. Finally, when asked about the progress of one of the game's development, presumably Crash, Ryan stated the following. It didn't make it past pre-beta. Now, given the popularity of Skylanders and the remake of the original Crash trilogy, it would seem logical for a new entry into each of these franchises to begin. However, it could be that this is exactly what cancelled them. Spyro could have been shelved so it didn't have to compete with the Skylanders series, and the new Crash game could have been pushed to the side to focus on the PlayStation 4 remakes. Before we get to the final and possibly the most obvious game on our list, we have our honorable mentions. PlayStation has tons of exclusive first-party games that have been cancelled or gone unreleased over the decades, so a simple top 5 wouldn't be enough. That is why in the near future, we will be making a second top 5 cancelled PlayStation games list, as well as videos on franchises requested from fans like yourself, such as Pokemon, Sonic, even another Zelda and cancelled Mario games video, as both franchises have had way more than 5 cancelled games. Also, to go along with this video on cancelled PlayStation games and our list video on cancelled Nintendo games, we will also be making a video on cancelled Xbox games, which has been popularly requested from fans like yourself. So be sure to let us know in the comments below which games you would like to see on videos in the future. Then like and subscribe so you don't miss out when those videos are uploaded. Our first honorable mention is Uncharted for the PlayStation Vita. The game would have started pre-production after the release of Golden Abyss. However, Naughty Dog was afraid that releasing too many Uncharted games so close to each other would lessen demand for the franchise. So even though Naughty Dog didn't want this follow-up to Golden Abyss, Sony was apparently in favor of it. Ultimately, the idea never moved forward. And this leads to our second, third, fourth, and even fifth cancelled PlayStation game. With Sony's Bend Studio not working on a second Uncharted, they spent a year developing several different demos and pitches. One of these being an infamous game developed from the ground up for the PlayStation Vita, as well as an unnamed steampunk game that was cancelled very early in pre-production. A futuristic sci-fi game that would take place in a large city and the player would scale buildings with jet boots, which we kind of already got in the Super Mario Bros. Movie. After a couple of other failed pitches, the studio decided to move on to developing games on the PlayStation 4. One of these PS4 pitches ended up being approved by Sony, and is now known today as Days Gone. Next we have Medieval 3 for the PlayStation 2, developed by Guerrilla Camper. The first 2 games in the series were successful, so the studio decided to begin working on the third game in the series, subtitled Fate's Arrows. However, the game was never greenlit by Sony. So even though the game had been in production for a while, in the end it was scrapped with the assets not being used. Next up is a game that was actually completed, just never released. Thrill Kill, developed after the popularity of games like Mortal Kombat were at an all-time high. The game was even referred to as the new Mortal Kombat during development, as the team working on the game was confident that it would become the go-to fighting game of choice. However, the game was cancelled weeks before release because EA felt that, in their own words, such a senselessly violent game would ruin their image. Let's not forget this is the same EA who has been voted the worst company in America several times. And that's not to poke fun at EA, I actually like some of their games. And finally, before we get to our last and obvious game, we have Ratchet & Clank Nexus. No, this isn't Into the Nexus, which was released. This was a game cancelled long before 2013, the year that Into the Nexus was released. Not much information is known about the game, but as a Ratchet fan, it does lead me to wonder what could have been. Last on our list is probably an obvious choice, and isn't necessarily a PlayStation exclusive. But it is without a doubt the biggest tragedy in terms of cancelled PlayStation 4 games. We're talking about Silent Hills and the playable teaser PT, which for those of you who don't know, is exactly what the initials stand for. To push the cancelled PlayStation part of this even more, the demo was only available on the PlayStation 4, and since being released from Konami, Kojima, the man in charge of the game, has signed on with Sony to make Death Stranding with his team, Kojima Productions, which consists of most of his original team from Konami. The man in charge of the team has signed an exclusivity deal with Sony to make Death Stranding. In an odd way, the cancellation of Silent Hills and the removal of PT by Konami from the PlayStation Store has created more than 4 separate spiritual successors. Some may be obvious, while you may have not even heard of the rest of these horror games, which came about soon after PT's cancellation, but I'll go into detail on them later in the video, so if you're a fan of PT and want a similar full-length game to play, then stick around. For now, I'll try to clear up a bit of the confusion surrounding the game being cancelled. Essentially, PT is the best free game that has ever existed. This is my opinion, everyone has their own, and if you don't agree, you're more than welcome to make your own list video. Anyways, PT is a clever tech demo of sorts designed to show off new gameplay mechanics and ideas that Kojima was going to implement into the full Silent Hills game. It had a strong focus on psychological horror, and instead of giving the player a giant open world to explore, it confined the player to a single hallway that would repeat itself over and over until every puzzle was completed, where the player would be greeted with an end cutscene that showed off what would have potentially been an area in the full Silent Hills game. Silent Hills was directed by Hideo Kojima along with Guillermo del Toro. It was to be the 9th main installment in the Silent Hills series. In an interview talking about Silent Hills, Kojima said, "In the past, I've mentioned Silent Hill in interviews, and as a result of that, the president of Konami rung me up and said he'd like to make the next Silent Hill. Honestly, I'm kind of a scaredy cat when it comes to horror movies, so I'm not confident I can do it. At the same time, there's a certain type of horror that only people who are scared of can create, so maybe it's something I can do. That said, I think Silent Hill has a certain atmosphere. I think it has to continue, and I'd love to help it continue. And if I can help by supervising or lending the technology of the Fox engine, then I'd love to participate in that respect." The following is a collection of almost everything known about the cancellation of Silent Hills, gathered from several different sources on Wikipedia, and gives a description better than I could. In March of 2015, sources reported that due to conflicts with Konami, Kojima and his senior staff planned to leave Konami following the completion of Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Concurrently, Konami announced a restructuring of its video game business and removed references to Kojima and Kojima Productions from the promotional materials for its games. A Konami spokesperson denied that Kojima was leaving the company, and stated that he would still be involved with Konami in the Metal Gear franchise. At a San Francisco Film Society event on April 26, 2015, Assistant Director Guillermo del Toro reportedly told attendees that Silent Hills had been cancelled. The next day, Norman Reedus also made statements on Twitter stating that the game had been cancelled. The same day, Konami announced that PT would be pulled from the PlayStation Store on April 29, 2015. And Polygon reported that an anonymous tip by a person familiar with the game's development had also confirmed the game's cancellation. On April 27, 2015, Konami issued a statement to Kotaku confirming that Silent Hills would not be continued, but that they plan to continue the Silent Hills franchise. Fans upset by the cancellation later started a petition on change.org asking for Konami to continue the project. As of March 4, 2016, the petition has received close to 200,000 signatures. In a tweet from Guillermo del Toro, he revealed that horror manga artist Junji Ito, which I apologize for mispronouncing that name, would also have been involved with the project. Cliff Bleszinski was also asked to work on the project, but declined, later explaining on Twitter, "I don't like LA, I love new IP, and I would have fucked up Silent Hills." Now, let's get to those spiritual successors of PT and Silent Hills. And if I leave any out, please let me know in the comments below so myself and others can check them out. First up is the game being worked on by the original team, who created PT and was to work on Silent Hills. With Death Stranding, some of the ideals meant for Silent Hills could end up in Kojima's new game, which is an exclusive for PlayStation, by Hideo Kojima, Del Toro, and the original Kojima Productions team, as well as keeping Norman Reedus tied to the game. The second spiritual successor would technically just be a sequel, as Konami has stated that while Silent Hills has been cancelled, they do plan on continuing the Silent Hill franchise with more games. Seeing as PT and Silent Hills gained so much of a positive reaction, it's pretty safe to say that Konami would likely include some of the new game mechanics in future titles. Third, we have an indie game called Allison Road, which I believe began production after being directly inspired by PT. It plays almost identical to the PT demo, except in the gameplay we've seen from Allison Road, you can freely walk inside and outside of a full house, as opposed to being confined to a single hallway. However, it still keeps the same type of psychological scares as PT. Finally, we have Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. and several other horror games like Allison Road, which have been directly influenced by PT. Resident Evil 7 is a huge 180 from recent Resident Evil titles and brings the game back to its horror and survival focused roots as opposed to its recent action-based gameplay. The game, similar to PT, makes you play in first person mode instead of third person for the first time, and keeps you confined to narrow hallways with a focus on psychological horror instead of the fast-paced gory action the series has recently been pushed to. If that isn't enough, the game is one of the first full-length AAA games playable in VR, especially on a console. I'm not saying Resident Evil 7 seen what PT and Silent Hills was trying to do and seen a way to profit off of its cancellation, but the sudden tonal shift in the series that came almost directly after Silent Hill's cancellation, which had a huge demand from old fans and new players who hadn't been introduced to the franchise yet, leaves me thinking it's more than a simple coincidence. I want to thank you all for watching this video and welcome to the End Slate. If you're a fan of these videos, please subscribe and comment below to let me know your thoughts. If you would like to support this channel, please consider supporting on Patreon, where you can watch videos like this early and help me create longer videos like the top 10 best and worst of Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild, and the top 5 official Zelda games that have either been cancelled or just went unreleased. Finally, a huge thank you to this month's supporters: George Says Hi, Link Uses the Triforce, Transcendent Sacred Courage, Glenn Cassio, Prey Warrior, Victopedia, Rusty Caulfield, Robert W., Amanda Pina, Lunarium, Chris Gasparin, Harris Priest, Lovable Christie, Key of Time 15, Jerome Measure, Daryl Quinnen, Furzin 16, Kadron, Magic Tech Review, and the Itch Network.